The great hall of the Wolf-Blood Kingdom was alive with whispers, though the torches along the walls flickered as if afraid to reveal the full truth. Shadows danced across the tall, carved columns, carrying the echoes of centuries of rule. Humans were rare in this kingdom, and even rarer was one who dared to walk into the court without trembling. Alara stepped carefully over the stone floor, her boots making soft thuds that were drowned by the hum of anticipation. She had been brought here under mysterious circumstances, an outsider, a human, tasked with recording the kingdom's ancient lore. Her heart beat steadily, though a part of her knew that every eye in the room was upon her. The nobles watched, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disapproval. The air was thick with the scent of burning candles and a faint trace of iron. She carried herself with as much poise as she could summon. Her dark hair was braided simply, and her cloak was pulled close around her shoulders. The rich fabrics of the noble's garments glimmered in the firelight, far too heavy and ornate for someone like her. She felt the weight of their judgment, but she refused to bend beneath it. Humans were not meant to bow in fear. They were meant to endure, to adapt, to survive. At the far end of the hall, a figure moved with a grace that made every eye follow him. Kale, the Alpha King's youngest heir, was all golden eyes and sharp lines. His presence commanding. Even without speaking, he was known throughout the kingdom as unpredictable, playful when it suited him, dangerous when it did not. His hair shone like burnished gold, catching the torchlight, and his gaze swept across the room until it settled on Alara. The moment their eyes met, a ripple of unease spread through the nobles. Kale's gaze was not one of judgment. It was curious, probing, alive. And something in it made Alara's chest tighten with a strange, unfamiliar feeling. She lifted her chin, meeting his eyes without flinching. Then, as if compelled by instinct rather than reason, Kale stepped forward. In one swift, fluid motion, his hand shot out, and his teeth grazed the sleeve of her cloak. The fabric tore slightly, a faint sound that echoed through the hall. Gasps followed, sharp and numerous. The room fell silent. A human being had been bitten by a wolf-blood heir. In this kingdom, such an act could mean insult, punishment, or worse. Alara froze, her pulse hammering in her ears. Every noble seemed frozen, staring at her with disbelief, waiting to see what she would do next. But instead of pulling back, instead of screaming or fleeing, she smiled. A slow, small curve of her lips, but enough to carry defiance, curiosity, and a spark of something dangerously playful. Then, with a boldness that startled even herself, she tugged gently on Kale's hand, meeting his gaze. Whispers surged again, a mixture of shock and outrage. No one had ever seen a human respond to a wolf-blood heir this way. The bite, an act of instinctive dominance, had been returned with acknowledgement and challenge. Kale's golden eyes widened in surprise, and then a slow, knowing smile spread across his face. He leaned closer, his presence overwhelming, filling the space around her with warmth and power. For a moment, it was as if the hall had ceased to exist. Only they were there. A human and a wolf-blood prince, testing the limits of each other in silence. "You are unusual," Kale murmured, his voice low and smooth, carrying an edge of amusement. The words were in the wolf-blood tongue, but the meaning was clear even to a human like Alara. He was curious. He was intrigued. Alara met his gaze evenly. "I do not fear what I do not understand," she replied simply. Her words were measured, but they carried weight. She did not bow. She did not apologize. She dared to challenge the unspoken law of the court. The nobles were aghast. A human speaking in such a manner to a prince was unheard of. Yet, the Alpha King did not immediately move to punish her. Instead, his eyes dark, piercing, and centuries-old watched the interaction like a hawk observing prey. There was a tension in the room, taut as the string of a bow, waiting for the inevitable snap. Kale's smile widened, a mixture of amusement and admiration. He straightened, giving a small bow that was mockingly polite, and then withdrew, though his gaze never left her. The message was clear. This human had drawn his attention, and he did not intend to look away. The ceremony continued, but Alara's mind was a storm. Every movement in the hall seemed magnified, every glance from Kale, a message she could not yet decipher. The nobles tried to maintain composure, but whispers followed her like a shadow, and she felt the weight of every eye that doubted her. She did not flinch, though. Humans survived by endurance, by wit, by the courage to meet impossible odds. Later, as the hall emptied, Kale found her near one of the torch-lit windows. The moonlight spilled across the floor, silver and cold, painting her in stark relief. He stepped closer, his presence filling the narrow space, yet there was a gentleness beneath the fierce exterior. "You are not like the others," he said, his voice softer now, almost hesitant. "You do not bow. You do not tremble. Why?" Alara looked out over the moonlit courtyard, the wind tugging at her cloak. "Because fear is a cage," she said simply. "And I do not intend to live behind bars." Kael studied her, the faintest shadow of admiration in his golden eyes. He had met many humans before, but none like her, none who dared to look at him and see beyond the power, the status, the centuries of rules and expectation. She was dangerous, and yet she was compelling. "Dangerous humans rarely survive here," he said, a small warning hidden in his words. "I do not intend to survive quietly," Alara replied, her voice steady. "I intend to matter." For the first time, Kale's expression faltered, revealing a hint of something deeper. Curiosity mixed with caution. Fascination mixed with uncertainty. He was the heir to a kingdom bound, by tradition, by law, by power, and yet, he found himself drawn to her in ways he had never imagined. The moment was broken by the echo of footsteps. The Alpha King entered the hall, his presence immediately commanding silence. Every noble straightened, the tension ratcheting higher. Kale stepped back, though his gaze remained on Alara. The king's voice was low and sharp, carrying the authority of a ruler who had seen centuries pass. "This human," he said, glancing at her, "has dared to provoke my heir in my court. Such insolence must be tested." Alara's stomach tightened, but she did not falter. She had expected danger. She had prepared for it. The test, whatever it would be, was simply another step in proving herself. Kale's eyes darkened, conflicted. He had wanted to protect her, yet he knew the trials were inevitable. "You will face the trials of the pack," the king continued. "Only then will we see if a human can survive among us." Alara swallowed. Her pulse was rapid, yet her mind was clear. She had been thrust into a world of danger, power, and ancient traditions, but she would not be broken. She would not be bowed. She would survive, and more than that, she would leave her mark. As she left the hall, Kale's gaze followed her, unwavering. He knew the bite of curiosity she had provoked in him could not be ignored. Something had begun between them. A thread of connection, fragile, yet undeniable. Something that could change both of their destinies. Outside, the wind swept across the castle courtyard, carrying the scent of snow and cold stone. The night was quiet, but it was only the beginning. The trials awaited, as did the dangers, the secrets, and the shadows that lingered in every corner of the Wolf-Blood Kingdom. And somewhere deep inside, Alara felt it, the sense that this bite, this bold gesture, was more than a mere act of mischief. It was the start of something neither she nor Kale could yet name. A spark that would burn brighter than fear, stronger than tradition, and possibly more dangerous than either of them had ever imagined. The human had not bowed, the Wolf-Blood Prince had not been denied, and the kingdom, for the first time in centuries, had begun to notice a new kind of power rising, a power that neither human nor Wolf-Blood alone could contain. Dawn broke over the Wolf-Blood Kingdom, spilling pale light across the jagged cliffs and the frozen courtyard. The castle seemed alive with the whispers of ancient spirits, the stones themselves remembering centuries of rule, power, and blood. Elara stepped carefully onto the cold flagstones, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Today, she would face the trials, the tests designed to see if a human could endure, could survive, and perhaps even belong among the wolf-bloods. Kale waited at the edge of the courtyard, his golden eyes gleaming in the morning light. He was a mixture of challenge and allure, his stance relaxed, but every movement alert. When he saw her approach, a small smile tugged at his lips. "You are brave," he said softly, his voice carrying over the still air. "Or foolish. Perhaps both." Elara met his gaze evenly, her chest rising with determination. "I am neither. I am ready." He studied her for a long moment, and she could almost feel the weight of his scrutiny, sharp and unyielding. Then, without a word, he turned and led her toward the first trial. The Forest of Shadows. The forest lay just beyond the castle walls, ancient and dense. Its trees gnarled and twisted, as though sculpted by dark magic. Fog clung to the ground like a living thing, curling around roots and rocks, obscuring the paths and hiding dangers. The wolf-bloods spoke of the forest in hushed tones, telling tales of spirits that could trick the mind and beasts that could tear the unwary apart. Elara felt a chill crawl over her skin. But she did not falter. She had come prepared. Her mind was sharp, her senses alert. She had survived hardships before, though none like this, and now, with Kale walking silently beside her, she felt a mixture of fear and anticipation, a thrill that made her pulse quicken. The first trial was simple in description, but deadly in execution. They had to reach the heart of the forest, a place where the oldest spirits of the kingdom dwelled, and retrieve a silver token shaped like a wolf's fang. The forest would test their courage, their resolve, and their ability to trust one another. As they moved deeper, the shadows seemed to twist and stretch, forming shapes that whispered and taunted. Elara tightened her grip on her cloak, feeling the pull of ancient magic, a cold presence that sought to sway her mind. She could hear Kale's footsteps beside her, steady and confident, and it gave her a strange comfort. "You are calm," Kale remarked after a while, his voice cutting through the eerie silence. "Most humans would be screaming by now." Elara glanced at him, raising an eyebrow. "Most humans do not survive to face these trials." He laughed softly, a sound that echoed through the fog like a bell. "Perhaps you are more wolf than human." Their banter, light and fleeting, was a fragile shield against the oppressive weight of the forest. Shadows shifted around them, forming fleeting glimpses of animals and spirits that vanished before they could be fully seen. The air grew colder, and a mist swirled around their feet as though the forest itself were breathing. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them. A figure emerged from the fog, tall and imposing, with eyes that glowed like embers. It was a spectral wolf, larger than any natural creature, its form wreathed in shadow, its gaze fixed on Elara, and the air seemed to thrum with the power of the ancient magic that bound it. Kyle stepped in front of her, his stance protective, yet there was a flicker of tension in his eyes. The wolf growled, a low, echoing sound that made the blood run cold. "Elara," Kale murmured. "Do not falter. Trust yourself." "And me." She nodded, gripping her cloak tightly. The wolf circled, testing, sniffing the air. Then, in one swift motion, it lunged. Kale moved with the speed of a predator, placing himself between her and the beast. The spectral creature's teeth grazed his shoulder, leaving no wound but a shiver of energy that ran through the air. Elara's heart raced, but she did not back down. She reached for a branch on the ground, waving it as though to mimic Kale's movements. She spoke in a steady voice, calling out the words of an old lullaby she had learned as a child. The wolf hesitated, its form flickering, shadows bending in response to the sound of her voice. Kale glanced at her, surprise flashing in his golden eyes. "You can affect it?" "I do not know," Elara admitted, her voice firm, "but I will not run." Together, they faced the spectral wolf, moving in tandem, matching instincts and courage. Slowly, the beast's form softened, its growl fading into a low whine. The shadows around it receded, leaving the path to the heart of the forest clear. They continued, each step taking them deeper into the forest's secrets. Along the way, Kale's golden gaze often met hers, a mix of curiosity and something else she could not name. Each shared glance, each brush of fingers as they navigated the twisted roots, sent shivers through her body. The tension between them grew, charged and electric, unspoken but undeniable. By the time they reached the heart of the forest, the moonlight broke through the canopy, casting silver light over an ancient stone pedestal. On it rested the silver token, glinting as though alive. Ilara stepped forward, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for it. The air hummed with energy, and Kale's hand brushed hers, sending a jolt through both of them. She lifted the token, and a surge of warmth and power coursed through her. It was not just magic, it was recognition. A silent acknowledgement that she had endured, that she belonged here, at least for this moment. Kale's expression softened, though his golden eyes remained intense. "You are remarkable," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "Do you know what this means?" Ilara shook her head. "Only that I survived, for now." He smiled, though it was tinged with concern. "For now," he echoed. "The trials are only beginning. There are forces here older than the kingdom itself, forces that will not forgive mistakes." As they turned to leave the forest, a shadow moved at the edge of their vision. Ilara felt it before she saw it, a whisper of danger, a premonition that the trials were far from over. She glanced at Kale, who noticed the shift in her expression immediately. "What is it?" he asked, his voice sharp. She shook her head. "I do not know. But it is coming." Before either of them could react, a figure emerged from the mist, a woman, tall and cloaked in black, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. She spoke in a voice that carried over the forest like a chant, each word resonating with power. "Human," the woman said, her tone both warning and challenge. "You walk a path you do not yet understand. The bond you form with the wolf blood is a dangerous one. It will demand more than courage. It will demand loyalty, sacrifice, and perhaps your heart." Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. Kale stepped forward, placing himself between her and the mysterious woman. "She will do what is needed," he said firmly. "I will not allow harm to come to her." The woman's gaze swept over him, and for a moment, Kale's confident demeanor faltered. "The curse," the woman whispered. More to herself than anyone else, "it grows stronger. The air cannot stand alone. Only the human can anchor him, if she chooses." Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. The trials were not just tests of courage, they were tests of loyalty, of heart, and of destiny itself. And Kale was caught between duty, instinct, and feelings that he could not yet name. The forest seemed to close in around them as the woman vanished into the mist. Silence returned, but it was heavy, full of the weight of unseen eyes and unspoken threats. Kale turned to Ilara, his expression unreadable. "You see now," he said softly, "why the pack fears the human who survives. You are unlike any I have met, and I am not sure if I am ready for what comes next." Ilara met his gaze without fear. "Then we face it together," she said firmly. "I am not leaving, Kale. Whatever comes, I will not run." A faint smile touched his lips, a mixture of relief and admiration. "Good," he whispered, "because the next trials, they will test more than courage. They will test the heart." The forest around them seemed to breathe, the shadows shifting as if acknowledging her words. Ilara felt a strange sense of destiny, a connection to Kale that went beyond words or understanding. The trials had begun, but she would endure, no matter what lay ahead. The wolf-blood kingdom lay under a heavy sky, the clouds dark and low as if pressing upon the stone towers. Lightning flickered in the distance, and a cold wind swept across the cliffs, carrying with it the scent of snow, iron, and the distant howl of wolves. Ilara and Kale stood at the edge of the forest, the silver token clutched in her hand. Their bond had grown stronger through the trials, yet the weight of what was to come pressed down upon them both. The Alpha King's voice had echoed in her mind since the forest, cold and unyielding. Fail, and you will not leave this kingdom alive. Kale turned to her, his golden eyes full of tension and something deeper, something unspoken, raw, and vulnerable. The final trial awaits, he said, his voice low. Not only for you, but for me as well. Elara nodded, gripping the token. She had survived the forest of shadows, faced spectral beasts, and navigated trials of wit, courage, and instinct. But now, she knew, the greatest trial would test more than skill, it would test their hearts. The path led them to the castle's highest tower, the Hall of Ancestors. The doors were massive, carved from dark wood and engraved with symbols that pulsed faintly with magic. Kale pushed them open, revealing a chamber bathed in silver light from a crystal that floated at the center. Around it, shadows swirled like living smoke, whispering the names of long-dead rulers and heroes. This place, Elara whispered, awe in her voice. It feels alive. It is, Kale said softly. Every ruler, every heir, every choice ever made in this kingdom. It echoes here. The final trial is not just about survival. It is about choice. The crystal flared, and the shadows drew back, forming a figure that was both familiar and terrifying. The spectral wolf from the forest materialized, but this time, it was larger, more imposing, its eyes burning with an inner fire. And behind it, the Alpha King appeared, not as flesh and blood, but as a towering vision of power. His gaze sharp and unwavering. You have come far, human, the Alpha King said, his voice echoing across the chamber. You have survived where others would have fallen. But now, the choice must be made. The curse upon my line, it can be undone, but only if you willingly bind yourself to the heir of the wolf bloods. To refuse is to condemn the kingdom, and perhaps, to condemn yourselves. Elara felt the weight of his words settle like a stone in her chest. The forest, the trials, Kale's unwavering gaze, all had led to this moment. Her heart raced, yet she did not falter. She looked at Kale, whose golden eyes met hers with a mix of fear, longing, and trust. I understand, she said quietly, and I choose. The chamber responded instantly. Shadows surged, the crystal flaring brighter, and a wind whipped around them. Kale stepped closer, reaching for her hand, their fingers intertwined, and the air seemed to hum with power. You are certain? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. I am, Elara replied. Whatever comes, I face it with you. The spectral wolf howled, a sound that shook the chamber, and then lunged forward, not in attack, but as part of the ritual. Its teeth grazed Kale's shoulder, leaving no wound but sending a pulse of magic through both of them. The shadows writhed, forming a circle around the crystal, and the names of the ancestors whispered like wind through the trees. The bond sealed slowly. A golden light connecting Elara and Kale, weaving through their hands, their hearts, their very souls. It was not pain that she felt, but transformation, a merging of courage, loyalty, and an energy that was older than the kingdom itself. Kale's chest rose and fell against hers, and in that moment, the tension between them shifted, softening into trust, understanding, and something infinitely deeper. You are extraordinary, Kale murmured, his lips close to her ear. I never thought. You thought what? Elara asked softly, her hand brushing against his cheek. That I could feel this, he admitted. That I could care for a human as much as I care for the pack. But you have changed everything. The Alpha King's spectral form observed silently, his expression unreadable. Slowly, he raised his hand, and the shadows began to recede. The curse, which had hung over the line of heirs for centuries, started to unravel. The crystal's glow softened, bathing the chamber in a gentle light that promised hope rather than fear. But even as the magic shifted, danger was not gone. A voice echoed through the chamber, cold and distant. The bond is sealed. But the consequences are only beginning. Alara felt a shiver run through her. She glanced at Kale, whose expression mirrored her own mixture of triumph and apprehension. They had survived the trials, faced the curse, and formed a bond that defied expectation, but the world outside this chamber would not be so forgiving. Kale stepped forward, placing his hand on the crystal. "The kingdom will change," he said firmly. "No longer will humans be dismissed. No longer will fear dictate the pack. We are stronger. Together." Alara smiled, feeling the truth of his words resonate deep in her chest. She had not come here to survive quietly. She had come to matter, to leave a mark, and to challenge a world built on fear and tradition. And now, standing hand in hand with Kale, she knew she had done just that. The spectral wolf tilted its head, as if acknowledging her courage, and then faded into the shadows. The Alpha King's form lingered a moment longer. And then, with a nod that was both acceptance and warning, he disappeared. The chamber fell silent. The only sound, the soft rustle of their breath. Kale turned to Alara, his golden eyes warm, filled with a mixture of awe and something that resembled hope. "You chose to bind yourself," he said softly, "and in doing so, you saved more than the kingdom. You saved me." Alara squeezed his hand, her heart full. "And you saved me, Kale, every step of the way." They left the Hall of Ancestors together, stepping into the light of dawn. The castle seemed different now, less foreboding, less oppressive. The wind carried the scent of snow and pine, of cold stone warmed by sunlight, and a new promise hovered in the air. The nobles gathered below, their expressions a mixture of shock, awe, and reluctant respect. The human had survived. The heir of the Wolfbloods had been changed, and the kingdom had begun to shift, quietly but irrevocably, under the power of courage, choice, and the bond of hearts. Kyle and Alara stood at the top of the cliff, the wind tugging at their cloaks, their hands still intertwined. The world stretched before them, wide and uncertain, but no longer frightening. Whatever trials awaited, whatever forces stirred in the shadows, they would face them together. For the first time, the Wolfblood Kingdom felt alive, not with fear, but with possibility. And in that moment, Alara knew that the bite of curiosity, the tug of courage, and the spark between human and wolf blood were only the beginning of a story that would echo through the ages.